Hello and welcome to This Is. Smartphones are out of control. So if you look at what the flagship level of a smartphone looks like today, you're spending over $1,000 easy. I mean, if you're in Samsung's camp, you might be up to $2,000 for the Z Fold 2. And while there's nothing wrong with some crazy experimental high-end device, you also look at something like the iPhone, which is well above $1,000, and I'm sure with the iPhone 12 will be even higher. You look at something like the S20 Ultra or the Note 20 Ultra, those are approaching $1,500. The flagship that we all know and love is just simply ridiculously overpriced for most people, which means that the previous mid-range of the market, so the OnePluses, the iPhone SEs, the LG Velvets of the world, have now very much sort of filled that role of $400 to $700 or so that I think most people probably want to buy their phones in, at least in the kind of the mid-range of the market.
Right. And there's so much there where you start to have this fight of like different trade-offs and like things that you might prefer and different platforms. Like, where do you stand on it?
So what really got me thinking about this is the Google Pixel announcement from a few days ago. The new Pixels are, I would say, no longer flagships, right? I think last year the Pixel 4 was aiming to be a flagship and had most of those same features, but the Pixel 5 and the Pixel 4a 5G, I can't believe I'm saying that with a straight face, are both phones that I think are pretty solidly in this sort of upper mid-range that is becoming standard, right? So specifically with the Pixel 5, you were getting a $700 device that has a lot of flagship-y features, so aluminum build, water resistance,
the camera,
5G.
obviously, right?
We'll talk about that in a second. But one of the downsides that you're getting is only 90 hertz display as opposed to 120, which is not the end of the world, but also it has a lower end processor. It is the same Snapdragon 765G as something like the Velvet or something like the OnePlus Nord. And specifically with the Nord, I mean, that is available in a $450 phone. So it's one of those things where it used to be your flagship was the high-end specs, the high-end camera, the high-end everything. But at this point, you can't get the high-end, no compromises device below $1,000, right? I mean, the OnePlus 8 Pro is probably the closest to that do-everything device that's just barely squeaks below $1,000.
Yeah, and the thing is that there are weird outliers. I think, like, where I partially agree and partially disagree. At retail, especially when you're looking at MSRP, a lot of those phones retail for $1,000 or more that have those top feature specs, you know, the top of the line, you know, in this generation, the what is it, the Snapdragon 865
and 865 Plus. If you look back at traditional Samsung, and in fact, even up until fairly recently, you could get the $1,000 Galaxy S20, which was sort of one of the phones that really kicked everything off this year, because even the base model of the S20 this year was $1,000. And then they announced the Galaxy S20 Fan Edition. Now on the surface, this looks like a really solid phone. So yes, there are some compromises. It has a plastic back. You have slightly worse cameras, although I think the selfie camera has been upgraded. And you have a 1080p display instead of 1440, but it's still 120 hertz, still has 865. It looks good on paper.
It's most of what people want in the S20, just at a lower price, which is, I feel like is a smart move.
But there's a big but here. $700 seems great, right?
Yeah.
There's minimal changes. Guess what? As soon as that thing came out for pre-order on Amazon, every S20 immediately went straight back up to $1,000. They were discounting those S20s. I'm sure if you look hard enough, you'll be able to find them. But as I was starting to do a little bit of research, I couldn't find a cheap S20 anymore. And then if you look at something like the Pixel, right? So again, Pixel 5 is $700.
Okay.
It is $200 more expensive than the 4a 5G, which it shares the same cameras with, the same specs, 5G. There are a couple of things that the 5 has. So you have that 90 hertz display, you have the aluminum build, the water resistance. But generally speaking, I would say they're very similar phones.
Would you get the Pixel 5 over the Fan Edition though?
Something I've been thinking about a lot is what is the right phone at this kind of price. Earlier this year, we had the iPhone SE, the Nord, the Pixel 4a, all of which are really solid phones in that $350 to $450 price point. Honestly, any of those phones I think are 100% daily drivers. You can get years of use out of them, no problem. But as you start to get up to this slightly higher end market, there are a couple of things that jump out. So first of all, we have more phones that are coming. So on top of the Pixel, on top of the S20 Fan Edition, on top of the LG Velvet, there's the iPhone 12 mini. That thing's probably going to be out very shortly. I would be very surprised if that is not in the $700 to $750
I would
price point.
hope so.
Absolutely needs to be. I think we're going to see iPhones from like $700 to probably like $1,200, $1,300 based on the iPhone 12.
They gotta bridge
split.
the gaps, right?
Yeah, and there's also potential that some of the iPhones may or may not have high refresh rate displays, 5G. So the pricing, I feel like, is going to be all over the place. And also, OnePlus have recently come out and talked about the OnePlus 8T. So it will be getting some upgrades over the OnePlus 8. So just like always, every 6 months they upgrade things. So the 8T will have a 120Hz display as opposed to 90Hz. But what we don't know is what that price will be. I assume it will be roughly in that $700 price point as well. Right. And it could easily be the most well-rounded of all of these because the OnePlus 8 is great right now.
Right.
And the 8 Pro, I think, is still the closest to a fully featured flagship that's not crazy expensive.
I think the main crux here is that in this $750 price point, or like, you know, more or less, right? There are a lot of compromises that you have to sift through in order to figure out, you know, what suits your needs the best.
Yeah.
Where obviously, you know, phones that are over $1,000, you know, when price is no object, you have less compromises there. You're closer to finding that perfect, as I said again, no compromises phone.
Yeah.
It's just what will get you there the closest. And if I had to pick one,
go for it.
If I had to pick one, for $450.
I think you took a breath, but you actually didn't say the name of the OnePlus Nord. You're like,
OnePlus Nord.
$450 if you can buy one, which we cannot here in the United States.
Yes, we don't have one in the US. I don't know if it was on record or not, but there might be a Nord in the US at some point, right?
I don't think they've announced anything, but there's tons of rumors about a Nord, yeah. Maybe cheaper though. It sounds like they may be working on a even sub like $300, something like that Nord. Right. But yeah, it does sound like there are more Nords
It's
coming.
Just for the price.
Yeah.
I feel like this is about as close to no compromise as you can get.
The Velvet is an interesting device because you do have the ability to connect the dual screen device.
Right, which I've used a lot.
Yeah, like there's some things that are going for it, but when you look at the OnePlus Nord, you have the 765G, you have 5G installed. Wait, 765G with 5G, there you go.
Lot of 5s and Gs.
I know my names and numbers and whatnot. But then I think if you're looking at this kind of price point, it might not be crazy to go for a Pixel 4a because that's a full $100 cheaper. You get the plastic build, which I actually personally like. There's nothing against the Nord, but it doesn't feel particularly premium, whereas the Pixel actually has a little bit of character to it.
The 4a 5G?
No, the standard 4a.
The standard 4a.
The 4a 5G is a whole separate beast. But then, to make everything even more confusing, the iPhone SE, $400, has a lot of advantages.
I love this phone a lot. This is probably my favorite iPhone of this year because it broke a lot of rules on the Apple side of things. So obviously the main reason why this is a great deal, especially right now, is because it is running current flagship specs.
A13, the best chip you can get.
The one that you get in the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro. And it comes with the same image processing as well, not necessarily the same camera.
Yes.
That's the biggest probably, you know, criticism of this. But I still think that with the image processing, this old lens with the new current image processing looks miles better than a lot of the phones that you can get at $400, including the Nord, including the LG Velvet, which costs $200 more.
You almost have to tear up your preconceptions on what you need in a phone, what are the main things of like, oh, I want a flagship, I want this, I want that. Because I think in 2020, going into 2021, there are a couple of things that for me have kind of changed order as far as what's most important. Battery life, with almost no exceptions besides the iPhone SE, is now good enough, right? Very few phones ship a battery that will not comfortably last you a full day.
Especially in the mid-range. The mid-range, oddly enough, is where you find those bigger battery capacities. Like the LG Velvet has a pretty big one too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Camera, I do think is important, but the baseline I think has also been raised, right? Even the worst of the camera phones out there right now in that mid-range are still, I would say, good enough.
Right.
But some things I think that are really overrated are the specs in the 5G. I don't care that my phone has 5G. Now, yes, if I can get 5G versus not have 5G, I will take it. Right. But I don't think that something like going from the Pixel 4a to the 4a 5G is necessarily worth it. Obviously not having used that 5G version yet, but the extra money to me doesn't seem like it is a huge difference. The thing I do think you should be paying attention to is not only the price, but also the screen. So getting a high refresh rate screen, to me, is a far more noticeable difference than a better processor. It's far more noticeable difference than having 5G. It is something that will make a real difference in day-to-day life, right? It is so much quicker and snappier.
It feels faster.
Yeah.
Like, you can have the fastest processor in the world, but if it has a 60 hertz refresh rate, subconsciously, when you don't have that motion blur and things seem like they're going quicker.
So the winners, I think, in all of this are companies like OnePlus, who got a lot of for going up in the price category, but everyone else, I feel like this year went even farther. So there's still, the difference is a high-end OnePlus is still hundreds of dollars less. So props to them. I will say good job to Google, but really on the 4A. The 4A 5G and the 5, without having used them yet, but at least from what we know right now, seem to be a little bit of a tougher sell. Whereas that 4A, I mean, they even said something along the lines of like, it's the highest selling Pixel they've had in either ever or in a long time. Like, clearly a very successful phone.
Right, and I want to say good job to Apple. Yes. Because, I mean, granted, they want the SE to be in the market for probably the next 4 to 5 years. So we'll see where they're gonna be with the SE2 down the line. But the fact that they included their top level specs, I mean, granted in an older body, but their top level specs for $400.
I'm willing to sacrifice no 5G and specifically the lower refresh rate on this because it's $400. And then the wild card here is that iPhone 12 mini, I really do think. The iPhone 11 is the most popular smartphone in the world. The year before that, the iPhone XR was the most popular smartphone in the world. Tons and tons of people buy in that $700 to $750 price point, the old where the old space where flagships used to live. And I think that iPhone 12 and the iPhone 12 mini, if they're still indeed in that $650 to $750 price point, are going to be very competitive if they do have some of these new features, if they're able to have 5G, if they're able to specifically have higher refresh rates, they're gonna have the improved cameras, etc., etc. So it is a very, very good time to be purchasing a smartphone, but also probably one of the more confusing times we've had in a long time. So thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe here on This Is for the latest and greatest in high refresh rate news. And until next time, Ken, are you going to recommend a phone for the very last 4 seconds of this video?
iPhone SE 2. Very good. Buy it.
Fanboy.
Unless you are an Android user.